Welcome to Silent Revenge, where the deepest wounds aren't made by strangers, they're carved by family. I never thought my own blood would teach me what betrayal truly feels like. But that day, standing in my own living room, I realized something terrifying. Love doesn't guarantee loyalty. I still remember the exact moment everything shifted. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind where sunlight spills lazily across the floor and you convince yourself life is stable. I was sitting across from my son Ethan and his wife Melissa, sipping coffee while little Noah ran around laughing. And then there was Lily, 8 years old, quiet, watchful, always careful not to take up too much space, as if she already understood she wasn't fully theirs. I adopted Lily after my sister passed away. She had no one else. And when Ethan and Melissa agreed to raise her alongside their biological son, I believed, foolishly, that love would even things out. I was wrong. So we booked it, Melissa said, casually scrolling through her phone. Book what? I asked. Ethan leaned back, smiling. A cruise. Caribbean. 2 weeks. I smiled at first. That sounds wonderful. For all of you. There was a pause. A small one. But loud enough. Melissa didn't even look up. Just us and Noah. I blinked. What about Lily? Ethan sighed like I'd asked something unreasonable. Mom, it's expensive. Nearly $20,000. We wanted to do something special for Noah. Something inside me tightened. Lily is your daughter too. Another silence. This one colder. Melissa finally looked at me, her voice flat. She's not really ours. The words hit harder than I expected. I turned toward Lily. She was sitting on the floor, pretending to draw, but her hand had stopped moving. She heard everything. Every single word. Don't worry, Ethan added quickly. She can stay here with you. It'll be easier for them. Not for the little girl silently breaking 10 feet away. That was the moment I realized something I should have seen much earlier. This wasn't just favoritism. This was rejection. And rejection, when it comes from family, leaves scars no one else can heal. I forced a smile. Of course, she can stay with me. But inside, something shifted. Something cold. Because that wasn't just a decision. It was a line. And they had just crossed it without hesitation. I looked at Lily again. Her eyes met mine for a second, full of quiet hurt she didn't dare express. That's when I made a promise to myself. They thought leaving her behind was just a small choice. They had no idea. It would cost them everything. Sometimes, people reveal who they truly are in the smallest decisions, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. I didn't sleep that night, not because of anger. Not yet. It was something worse, clarity. There's a moment after betrayal where your mind replays everything, every conversation, every glance, every small discomfort you ignored because you wanted to believe things were okay. That night I saw it all. Every time Lily was given less. Every time Noah was celebrated more. Every time Melissa used that subtle tone, polite on the surface, but cold underneath. And Ethan, my own son, had slowly learned to agree with her. I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, asking myself one question. How long has this been happening right in front of me? The next morning, I found Lily in the kitchen. She was carefully pouring cereal into a bowl, trying not to make a mess. 8 years old, moving like a guest in her own home. You're up early, I said softly. She flinched slightly, then forced a smile. I didn't want to bother anyone. That sentence broke something in me. You never bother anyone, sweetheart, I replied, kneeling beside her. This is your home, too. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't believe it. I hesitated before asking, Did you hear what they said yesterday? Her hands froze, a long silence. Then she shrugged, pretending it didn't matter. It's okay. Cruises are probably boring anyway. Children don't lie well, not when it comes to pain. I gently placed my hand over hers. You can tell me the truth. Her lips trembled. Did I do something wrong? That was it. That was the moment the anger finally arrived. Not loud. Not explosive, cold, controlled, dangerous. Because this wasn't just about a cruise anymore. They had made an 8-year-old child feel like she wasn't enough. No, Lily, I said firmly. You didn't do anything wrong. But someone did. And I knew exactly who. Later that afternoon, Ethan came by to drop off some paperwork. Travel insurance, booking confirmations, everything neatly organized. Like this trip was the highlight of their lives. Mom, can you make sure Lily sticks to her routine? He said casually. We don't want her getting too attached to special treatment. I stared at him. Too attached. To being treated equally? I'll take care of her, I replied calmly. He smiled, relieved. I knew we could count on you. Count on me. That phrase echoed long after he left, because what he didn't realize was that he had just handed me something far more valuable than responsibility. He had given me time. Time to observe. Time to think. Time to decide exactly how this story would end. And for the first time, I wasn't thinking like a mother trying to keep peace. I was thinking like someone who had finally seen the truth and was ready to act on it. When people show you their priorities, believe them, because that's where your place truly is in their life. The day they left felt heavier than it should have. Not because I was going to miss them, but because Lily was about to learn, in the most painful way, exactly where she stood in their world. I drove them to the airport myself. Ethan insisted it would be easier, and I agreed, not for convenience, but because I wanted to see it all one last time, clearly, without excuses. Melissa was glowing. Designer sunglasses, expensive luggage. She looked like someone stepping into a dream she believed she deserved. Noah was excited, practically bouncing. Grandma! There's going to be pools and slides and a kids' club and... I know, sweetheart, I smiled. It sounds amazing. Then I looked at Lily. She stood quietly beside me, holding onto the strap of her small backpack. No excitement, no questions. Just silence. Be good while we're gone, Ethan said to her, barely making eye contact. I will, she replied softly. Melissa added, almost as an afterthought, and listen to your grandma. No trouble, no hug, no reassurance. Nothing. I watched Lily's fingers tighten around her bag. That subtle, quiet reaction most people would miss. But I didn't, because I was watching now. Really watching. As we walked toward the departure gate, Noah suddenly ran back and hugged me. Bring me something cool, okay, he said to his parents. Melissa laughed. Of course, baby. Then nothing. Lily didn't get a goodbye hug, not even a second glance, and that's when something inside me went completely still. Not broken. Not emotional. Just still. Because clarity had replaced doubt. I placed my hand gently on Lily's shoulder, ready to go home. She nodded, but her eyes were fixed on Ethan and Melissa walking away. They didn't forget me, right? She asked quietly. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was too sharp for an 8-year-old. They're just busy, I said finally. She nodded again, accepting less like she always had. On the drive back, she didn't say a word, just stared out the window, watching the world pass by like she didn't belong in it. That silence said more than any tears ever could. When we got home, she went straight to her room. No complaints, no tantrums, just quiet acceptance. And that's what made it worse. Because children who feel loved fight for attention. Children who feel unwanted learn to disappear. I stood in the hallway, staring at her closed door, and felt something settle deep inside me. This wasn't just neglect. This was conditioning. They were teaching her that she was less. And if I allowed that to continue, I would be just as guilty. I walked back to the living room, picked up my phone, and looked at Ethan's travel confirmation email still open on the screen. $20,000 for one child, while the other stayed behind questioning her worth. I exhaled slowly, because now I knew exactly what I was going to do, not out of impulse, not out of anger, but with precision, because some lessons have to be taught the hard way. When silence replaces love, it doesn't mean peace. It means someone has already given up on you. I didn't rush. That was the first rule I set for myself. Revenge built on emotion is messy, but revenge built on patience, that's where real consequences begin. The house felt different with just me and Lily. Quieter, lighter somehow. Like the tension that used to sit in the corners had finally loosened its grip. The first evening, I knocked gently on her door. Can I come in? She hesitated before answering, okay. Her room was neat, too neat, like she was constantly trying to prove she deserved to stay. I sat beside her. How about we make our own plans while they're gone? She looked confused. Plans? Yeah. I smiled softly. Something special. Just us. She lowered her eyes. We don't have to spend a lot of money. That sentence, again. Careful. Restrained. Conditioned. I leaned forward. This isn't about money, Lily. It's about you. She didn't respond, but I saw it, that small flicker of hope she didn't dare trust. And that's when I began. Over the next few days, I changed everything slowly, intentionally. We cooked together. Not rushed meals, but real ones. Laughing when we made mistakes. Letting her choose what we'd eat. We went out for ice cream. She picked the biggest one, then immediately apologized for it. You never have to apologize for enjoying something, I told her. each moment small but powerful, not just building her up, but observing, listening, learning just how deep the damage went. One night, as we sat watching a movie, she leaned against me, carefully, like she was asking permission without words. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. She didn't pull away. Minutes passed. Then she whispered, "Why don't they like me?" There it was. The question they created. "They do," I said gently. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Not in the way that mattered. She shook her head slightly. "Noah gets everything right. I mess things up." My jaw tightened. "No," I said firmly. "You've just been treated like you do." She went quiet, processing. And in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't just about giving her love. It was about undoing the belief that she didn't deserve it. But while I was rebuilding her, I was also preparing something else. Something they would never expect. Late that night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Emails, documents, old records. I started digging into things I had ignored for too long. Financial transfers, property papers, legal agreements. Because if Ethan and Melissa thought their choices only affected Lily, they were about to learn how wrong they were. This wasn't just about teaching them a lesson. This was about redefining everything they thought they owned, including control. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. And for the first time, I smiled, because the pieces were starting to fall into place, and they had no idea what was waiting for them when they came back. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, patient, and already in motion before anyone notices. By the 5th day of their cruise, everything was ready. Not emotionally, legally. That's the difference people don't understand. Feelings fade. Paperwork doesn't. I sat across from my attorney, Daniel Reeves, a man I hadn't spoken to in years, not since I first divided my estate between Ethan and a future family I had imagined would be built on fairness. "How certain are you?" Daniel asked, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the documents. "Completely," I replied. He studied me for a moment. "This isn't a small change. You're removing your son as primary beneficiary." "I'm aware." "And transferring majority control to a minor." "To Lily," I corrected calmly. He leaned back. "That will create complications." I nodded. "Good." Because complications were exactly what Ethan and Melissa deserved. Not chaos, not destruction. Consequences. "I'll also need to assign a legal guardian for financial oversight," Daniel continued. "That will be me," I said. "With strict conditions." He raised an eyebrow. "Conditions." I slid a printed document across the table. He read silently for a moment, then looked up, surprised. "You're tying access to behavior."
"Yes."
"To both children." "No," I said, my voice steady. "To them." The rules were simple. No access to trust funds unless both children were treated equally. Documented proof. Education, travel, opportunities, everything balanced. No exceptions. No excuses. Break the conditions, lose everything. Daniel exhaled slowly. "This is strategic." I didn't respond, because this wasn't strategy anymore. This was correction. "Once this is signed," he added, "there's no easy reversal." I picked up the pen. For a brief second, Ethan's face crossed my mind. Not the man he was now. The little boy he used to be. And then I remembered Lily asking, did I do something wrong? I signed. "Finalize it," I said. Daniel nodded. "It'll be done by tomorrow." As I walked out of his office, I felt something unexpected, not guilt. Relief. Because for the first time, I wasn't enabling their behavior. I was confronting it in a way they couldn't ignore. That evening, I took Lily out to dinner. A small place. Warm lights. Soft music. She smiled more now. Spoke more. Laughed cautiously like she was still learning how. "Can I ask you something?" she said, stirring her drink. "Of course. If I was your real daughter, would things be different?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "You are my real daughter?" I said. And this time, I meant it in a way that carried weight. Because now it wasn't just words. It was written, secured, protected. She smiled faintly, and for the first time it reached her eyes. But as I watched her, I knew something else too. This wasn't over. Not even close. Because signing those papers wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of their downfall. And they were still out there, enjoying every moment of a trip that would cost them far more than $20,000. People think consequences come from confrontation, but the most lasting ones come from decisions made quietly, long before the truth is revealed. The call came on the 10th day of their cruise. I almost didn't answer. Not because I didn't know who it was, but because I wanted them to sit in their perfect little world just a little longer, unaware that everything waiting for them had already changed. But eventually I picked up. "Mum." Ethan's voice was bright. Too bright. "You wouldn't believe this place. It's insane. Noah's having the time of his life." I stayed silent for a second. Let him fill the space. "That's nice," I replied calmly. Melissa's voice came through next, faint but excited. "We're thinking of extending the trip by a few days. There's another island stop." "No," I said. The word landed heavier than I expected. A pause. "What do you mean, no?" Ethan asked, his tone shifting slightly. "I mean you already made your decision," I said. "Stick to it." Another silence. This one sharper. "Mom, it's just a few extra days," he insisted. "And Lily?" I asked quietly. He exhaled, annoyed. "She's fine with you." Fine, that word again, like she was an afterthought. I leaned back in my chair. "Then come home as planned." Melissa's voice cut in, colder now. "Is there a problem?" I almost smiled. "You'll find out when you get back." Ethan chuckled nervously. "Okay, that sounded dramatic." "It's not," I said. "It's necessary." Before they could ask anything else, I ended the call. Because explanations, they hadn't earned them. That night I sat with Lily on the porch. The air was calm, the kind of stillness that usually brings peace. But this wasn't peace. This was anticipation. "Are they having fun?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said. She nodded, looking down at her hands. "That's good." Even now, she wanted them to be happy, despite everything. I studied her for a moment. "Do you miss them?" She hesitated. "Then honestly, I don't know." That answer said more than anything else could have, because children are supposed to know they're missed. They're supposed to feel it. But Lily. She was still trying to figure out if she mattered enough to be. I reached over and gently lifted her chin so she would look at me. "You don't have to chase people who don't see your worth," I told her. "One day they'll realize what they lost." She frowned slightly. "What if they don't?" I held her gaze. "Then they were never worth chasing in the first place." She didn't fully understand yet, but she would. Sooner than I wished she had to. Because in just a few days, Ethan and Melissa would walk back into this house expecting everything to be exactly as they left it. Same control, same assumptions, same power. But what they didn't know was that power had already shifted, quietly, permanently. And when they finally saw it, it wouldn't be a conversation. It would be a reckoning. The most dangerous moment for someone who underestimates you is when they believe nothing has changed. The day they came back, I made sure everything looked exactly the same. That was important. Same furniture, same silence, same quiet house they had walked out of like nothing mattered. Because the real shock doesn't come from what changes. It comes from what doesn't. I heard the car pull into the driveway just after noon. Doors slammed, lauder, suitcases rolling across the pavement. "Noah burst in first. Grandma!" "Look what I got," he shouted, holding up souvenirs. I smiled warmly. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Then Ethan and Melissa stepped inside. Relaxed, sun-kissed, carefree. Like nothing had happened, like nothing needed to happen. "Hey, Mom," Ethan said casually, setting his bags down. "Everything good here?" "Perfect," I replied. Melissa glanced around. "Where's Lily?" "She's in her room," I said calmly. "Resting." Melissa nodded, already distracted. "Good. Travel days are exhausting." Of course, only their exhaustion mattered. Ethan stretched. "You wouldn't believe how incredible that cruise was. Totally worth every penny." I looked at him carefully. "I'm sure it was," I said. There was a pause. Something in my tone must have shifted, because Melissa narrowed her eyes slightly. "What's going on?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked over to the dining table and picked up a folder I had placed there earlier, neatly prepared, carefully arranged. I placed it in front of them. "What's this?" Ethan asked, frowning. "Open it." He exchanged a quick glance with Melissa before flipping it open. At first, confusion. Then, realization. And finally, panic. "What is this?" he said sharply, flipping through the pages faster now. Melissa grabbed the papers from him, scanning them. Her face went pale. This isn't real." "It's very real," I replied calmly. Ethan looked at me, disbelief turning into anger. "You removed me from everything." "Yes." "You gave it to—" He stopped, almost unable to say her name. "To Lily." I held his gaze. "She's my daughter too." Melissa scoffed. "This is insane. You can't just—" "I already did." Silence crashed into the room. Heavy, suffocating. "You're punishing us over a vacation." Ethan snapped. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. I'm correcting a pattern. Melissa's voice turned sharp. You're choosing her over your own son. I stepped closer. No, I said quietly. You made that choice for me the moment you left her behind. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing now. This is ridiculous. Fix it. I won't. His head snapped toward me. You have to. And that's when I said the one thing they weren't prepared for. You only get access if you treat both children equally. Every opportunity, every experience. No exceptions. Melissa laughed bitterly. You're controlling our lives now. I met her stare. No, I said. I'm protecting hers. Another silence. But this one was different, because now they understood. This wasn't a threat. It was already done. Irreversible. And for the first time since they walked in, they weren't in control anymore. When people take power for granted, the hardest lesson is learning what it feels like to lose it completely. They didn't argue right away. That's what surprised me the most. For a few seconds after my words settled, the room went completely silent. Not the kind of silence filled with denial, but the kind that comes when reality finally hits. Hard. Ethan was the first to break. This is blackmail, he said, his voice lower now, less confident. No, I replied calmly. This is accountability. Melissa crossed her arms tightly. You're forcing us to change how we raise our kids. I didn't flinch. No, I'm forcing you to face what you've been doing. That's when Lily appeared. She stood quietly at the hallway entrance, unnoticed at first, watching, listening. The same way she always had. Only this time things were different. Ethan turned and saw her. His expression shifted instantly. Lily, hey, sweetheart, sweetheart, now. After everything, she didn't move, didn't smile. Just looked at him like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. Melissa stepped forward, forcing warmth into her voice. Wu brought you something from the cruise. Lily's eyes flickered to the bag in her hand, then back to her face. Why didn't you take me? She asked quietly. No anger, no tears, just a question, and somehow that made it worse. Ethan hesitated. It was just complicated. She nodded slowly. Okay, that was it, no argument? No reaction, just acceptance. But this time it wasn't the same kind, because now she wasn't accepting less. She was accepting the truth. And that truth had consequences. I stepped beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. She won't be treated like an option anymore, I said firmly. Melissa exhaled sharply. You're turning her against us. I looked straight at her. No, I said. You did that yourselves. Ethan's voice softened, almost pleading now. Mom, we can fix this. I held his gaze. And for the first time, I didn't see my son. I saw a man who had made a choice, and now had to live with it. You don't fix this with words, I said quietly. You fix it with actions, consistent ones. He nodded slowly, because he knew they both did. This wasn't something they could talk their way out of. They had two options now: change, or lose everything, not just financially, but emotionally. Because Lily, she wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. She had already found something stronger, self-worth. And as I stood there watching them finally understand the weight of what they had done, I felt something settle inside me. Not victory, not satisfaction, just balance. Because in the end, this was never about revenge. It was about making sure one little girl never felt invisible again. And if that meant breaking everything they thought they controlled, then so be it. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't hurting others, it's protecting someone they failed to value. If this story made you feel something hit-like, tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. And if you believe silence can be powerful, subscribe to Silent Revenge for more stories like this.